Hey, welcome to another video with Syndicate Gaming. Got myself, Bobby, and John here today to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy. Really cool affiliation. I think they're going to be a lot of fun to talk about. Um, we're going to be doing another deep dive video where we make a tier list of all the affiliated characters. Then we'll talk about splash characters, crisis cards. And then for this video, we're also going to quickly go over counterplay a little bit at the end, counterplay to the Guardians. Um, so yeah, I'm really excited to get into it. We can start out just by talking about our general thoughts on the affiliation and our play style that we like to go with for them. So yeah, John, as our local Guardians player, why don't you start us off?
Yeah. I think the main draw of Guardians for most people is that they're just a ton of fun. You can pretty much do whatever you want with them. They're very beginner friendly in that you kind of know what you need to do. You just need to run out, point and click. You have a bunch of different fun character models with cool abilities. Um, but on the other hand, you can even with just the affiliated Guardians, but then some interesting splashes can really lead to a high ceiling play. So more experienced players play them as well. And everything in between, you just kind of wing it. Like you have a general game plan in mind for your given secures and extracts, and yeah, you can pretty much do whatever. They're pretty laid back.
Yeah. I mean, we've got some of the most popular characters in Marvel in this affiliation right now, which I think is pretty sweet. They just had a movie come out. Um, and yeah, I would totally agree with what you're saying. I think, um, you know, I think a lot of people feel like Guardians are one of the best affiliations in Marvel right now. Just they have a lot of really high quality characters, really high density of high quality characters. Um, yeah, and that means you can't really go wrong with them. I think you're going to have a good time almost whoever you take and whatever variation on the strategy you want to use. Um, so yeah, I would agree. They're very beginner friendly, but then also the more experienced you are and the more time you put into them, the more and more success you can have all the way up to winning championships. So um, and they've gotten some characters more recently who have a little bit more of a control element to them. Um, so they're not 100% about damage. Um, maybe a little bit of an element of I'm going to throw this character to help me, uh, not fall too far behind on points while the rest of my team is killing your other characters.
Or you throw in a attrition sort of way.
Yeah,
That's usually my go-to.
yeah,
But
no,
yeah, so I guess just for anyone watching this later, kind of a snapshot of where we are in the MCP release schedule. I think we are a week away from Cosmic Ghost Rider releasing. Um, so yeah, right now there are 10 affiliated characters plus Cosmic Ghost Rider. I guess they haven't officially said Guardians, but Guardians is in his character description, so we pretty much know that he is Guardian, so we've included him in this list.
yeah, and I guess we can go ahead and jump into talking about what the tiers mean to us before we start putting characters into them. So, an S tier to me means a character who one of two things: either I want to bring them every game, or they're so generally good that I am never like unhappy to bring them. I can take them like 90% of games. Or a character maybe that I take less often, but they're super splashy. Like when you do take them, they have a really big impact on the game. Would be an S tier. What's an A tier for you, John?
Yeah, so probably a little bit less used than an S tier. I would say, you have a not a very specific game plan, but there are a lot of game plans that you have, a lot of contingencies where you are happy taking them. So maybe, if you have one or three secures and then you lose priority and you end up on your opponent's secures or however it goes down. Um, Maybe like the map shape is a little bit different, and you just want someone a little bit off from your like ideal setup. That's kind of where I would put the A tier characters. Is like they are great in a lot of situations. They just maybe have some weaknesses.
Yep, yeah, I would agree with that. And then I think B tier is when you start to get more into like your niche role player characters, like maybe they're really good at one thing, but not really that great at anything else. Or they're just maybe a generalist, but for whatever reason they have a decent weakness in there. And yeah, I think B tier is when you're starting to see characters that often will not make your 10. Maybe they make your 10 less often than not.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Somewhere between like 8 and 12 when you are, sitting on your phone late at night, just like making all your lists. Um, and you're like, man, I have 12 people in my list right now, and I just need to cut two. Like B tier characters are like, last in, first out. C tier, um, kind of have to have a game plan in mind for them. You kind of have to set out wanting to play them, I feel like. Um, yeah, you might have a lot of fun in your kitchen playing with your friends, with your C tier. Go for the laughs and the memes, or just see like, what's it going to take to make this guy work. Um, does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's nothing wrong with C tier characters. I never gonna blame someone for taking them. You're gonna have fun with them. They're gonna do things. If you're really just trying to win that tournament, like there might be a better option, but C tier characters, absolutely, they'll make it into your lists. There's situations where they can do that. And I want to reiterate again something we've mentioned in previous videos. Like, there's so much skill that goes into the Marvel Crisis Protocol game. And then even on top of that, like dice can be so swingy, and the way games play out can be so different depending on the crisis combinations. Um, like C tier characters, you can for sure win games with them. We just feel they're not as good as the higher tier characters. So
Yeah. And
um,
last up, we have D tier. D tier is, I would say, fairly rare in MCP. AMG has done a good job of keeping things fairly balanced and keeping some people up to date. But maybe D tier isn't quite as loved from development standards. Maybe they're just lacking in multiple areas. Maybe there's one thing they do okay, but nothing that they do great. And we look forward to seeing them get errated in the next card pack.
yeah, D tier is just like use with caution. You might not even have fun.
Yeah,
Which
might
luckily
might
there
feel
aren't
bad.
very many. Yeah, there's not very many of those characters, luckily. So um, yeah, well, I'm just gonna throw it out there, and it's just the two of us today, John. So we could definitely kind of go back and forth if we want to. But I think Star Lord is an S tier leader. Um, he's three threat, which is always nice for a leader. It makes list building a lot easier than a four threat leader. Um, he's pretty much pure damage. He's got the energy attack, long range, throws out conditions. Um, and then, his leadership, he hands out winging it tokens to three people, and they can spend that token at any point during the round to reroll either two attack dice, two defense dice, or two dodge dice, I believe.
Mhm.
Um, and he kind of defines the affiliation for me. Um, he's the only leader, so you're going to take him every game. And he really focuses on damage, attrition. The rerolls, you can use them for defense, but 4 out of 8 dice are successes on attack, and 3 out of 8 are successes on defense. So they're going to be better on offense. Also, the fact doing more damage gives you more power is another big reason why you really want to use them on offense if you can. And all that kind of adds up to Guardian's main plan is attrition, and he fits that plan so well. I think that's what makes him an S tier. Um, yeah. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of briefly touched on this last week, just prepping for this video. Um, I don't know. I'm not going to argue hard enough to move him down a tier, but maybe I don't know if this is devil's advocate or what, but sometimes he's a little flat for me. Um, he's got a great leadership. His kit is fine. I mean, he for a 3 threat, he's pretty good. He's got the range. He's got the hit and run, which is a kind of at a premium for everybody in this team to move outside of activation, or at least kind of cheat the action economy a little bit. Because if you can move and double tap, that's great. That's what this team wants to be doing. Um, I've definitely had games where he's off on a point. I'm kind of just okay for him to stand there in the back and poke anyone that gets close. Sometimes he just melts. Uh, Sometimes that one shield on defense is worse than not having any, because he can reroll all of his dice if he doesn't have any skulls or any hits on offense. Yeah, for a 3 threat, I think he is worth the S tier here. If he was any higher threat, and we'll cover that later, I would think he's definitely a lower tier than that. Yeah, super thematic, and where he lands and what he does for this team.
Yeah, and I don't think Star Lord all by himself is the reason Guardians are so good. It's almost sort of a when we get through the tier list, we'll kind of see where everyone falls. But I feel like in some ways, just having multiple like really solid characters, it helps all the characters feel good. Like when every character is pulling their weight, all the characters as a whole feel really good. And those games where Star Lords, um, 2 5 dice attacks that get thrown out and maybe they don't do much, like the games where he just doesn't roll as well because he's so like pure attrition. um that slack is probably going to be picked up by his other teammates, and it may not you know feel as bad as other pure attrition characters. Like Jimmy and I last week talked about Ghost Rider and how sometimes a character like Star Lord, who's pure attrition, when they whiff, it's really bad. But when you're rerolling 2 dice and all your characters on your whole team are rolling above average numbers of dice, the law of averages starts to kick in, I feel like, and you start to just do some good, consistent damage. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're right. Star Lord by himself is not lighting the world on fire.
Yeah.
But
And people smarter than me have done the math, and those winging it tokens can be absolutely huge. I mean, just even having 2 rerolls on average, just pure average, they can do some pretty crazy things there. It's just it kind of takes someone, a lot of these characters that are so attack focused, so attrition focused. Um, just 2 dice getting rerolled every turn. Um, maybe that just takes you from here to here, and you're just like that much more consistent, and you can actually build a game plan around it. Yeah.
do you
So
do
I
you
mean,
know how much damage on average the rerolls add? I
I know it depends on. Um, it changes pretty wildly based on how many dice you're rolling. I don't know how many 4 dice attacks are in this affiliation, but there's not many. I think there might be one on Agent Venom.
Yeah, my,
No,
my
no, he's
sense
got 5 dice.
my sense is that it adds like 1.5 damage roughly. That's completely off the top of my head, but it feels like definitely adds more than 1 damage on average. So
Right.
pretty strong. Yeah.
That
All
yeah.
right, all
So
right, John. Well,
so that Star Lord S tier. I think I've convinced myself to not be so close to the borderline there.
All right, what about Agent Venom?
Agent Venom, still fairly new at the time of recording, but he is a lot of fun. Um, he very much plays like a Guardians player, and he very much plays like what I imagine a Web Warriors player feels like, character feels like. Having spent most of my time with the Guardians, it's nice to have that mobility. Having that web swing is absolutely huge. So it's about the same length as a normal move for him. So it's kind of a two power hit and run almost. Um, you're still getting that one extra economy. You're getting your move, and then you can still double tap. Which, if he had less less words on his card, I would still be happy about that. I think he plays pretty well into the Guardians' plan of shoot everything. He's handing out incinerates automatically on a one power spender, which is just massive for this team. If you activate him pretty early, um, then he can get that grenade out and incinerate someone, and you follow in with uh, all of your other guns. That's pretty huge. He's removing a condition from himself, which is pretty big on one of my favorite crises, Demons Downtown. Um, yeah, he's just pretty solid. I know four threats in this game have kind of been wild and rampant this year. Everybody's getting them, and sometimes there's kind of some choices to make surrounding the four threats. Um, but he's a lot of fun, and we'll get into it with the tactics cards, but as a lovable misfits player, first and foremost, his forward assignment, it's all I think about when I play him. I want to do everything. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm definitely thinking like the bottom of S tier, but I could be convinced A tier, I think. Just because he can shred everyone else, but he can also just die in a turn with his energy defense, since energy is pretty popular these days.
yeah. I definitely agree with everything you said. Bringing the incinerate to the faction was pretty big because before him, they didn't really have easy access to incinerate. Now Cosmic Ghost Rider's coming out too, but so that was pretty huge. He also has the size 3 throw, which throws were really missing from the affiliation on at least the more played characters. Yeah, I agree. He could be an S tier. I think he's somewhere between A and S tier for me. He's a really strong, well-rounded character. That size, that range 3 place. I mean, that really just lets him get around, set up nasty beams, usually get 2 attacks a turn, which is great when you're focusing on attrition. Um, yeah, I think we can leave him there for now. Sounds good. Um,
Yeah, I really like your
Angela,
point about not having any throws in the affiliation because, um, I mean, just at the start of this year, we had very few character throws, at least. Angela has a great terrain throw. I think Drax has it's like a push and a throw, but they're on wild triggers. Just having that now it's like bread and butter for MCP, but now having that like guaranteed character throw is just massive.
yeah, I think Drax has a superpower throw, um, but he's just Drax doesn't always get played as much. So yeah, but yeah, Angela, you know, we've talked about her as a splash in our last 2 videos, which just tells you how good she is. So obviously she's going to be great when she's affiliated. Um, you know, I think she plays well into the attrition plan. She is more of a close range beater, which can be a nice combination when with all these longer ranged attackers backing her up. Um, if anything, I think sometimes she just gets pushed out of actually being played by just the really solid like core of low threat characters that Guardians has, and then they decide to splash like a unaffiliated high threat character. But I mean, she's still a very respectable character. I think she makes the 10 more often than not for Guardians. She gives you the midline extract steal, which can be nice.
Yeah, definitely. For me, she's not every game, because I kind of cycle her out with another 5 threat character that we'll, I guess, talk about during the splashes. Um, but I definitely like taking that 5 threat and up every game, unless something is just the scenarios are just calling for something even wider. Um, but yeah, she kind of does it all. For 5 threat, she has great defenses. People even forget about her defensive tech with her living ribbons, where you can't modify attack dice into her or do any rerolls against her. Um, she has that hypermobility. She's got a pursuit on range 4 attack, and she has a place on her, so only range 2 builder, but it's placing within 2. So it's kind of like Rhino, where she's just hopping everywhere. Um, yeah, and having that as Guardian 2 power return plus the long move on a medium base. Uh, Even if she's whiffing her attacks, you're getting her everywhere on the board, and then you're throwing buildings at people. Um, as a Guardians player, I never have priority. So turn 1, when someone else has already stolen that midline objective, and it's nothing for me to steal with Angela. I like just going up and throwing the largest terrain piece I can find at them. Um, but yeah, I mean, Angela for me is S tier. I know some people kind of. It's not that they don't like Angela usually. It's usually that there's other splashes that they're wanting to play, which for me that's still kind of S tier, just because she does everything well, and never I'm never angry with playing her.
Yeah, and what you said about throwing buildings, throws are a good way to bring extra damage. They often don't require an action, and the train's just like sitting there on the board. And if you don't throw it, your opponent will probably throw it. And so it's good to have these terrain throws. And yeah, kind of echoing again, like before Agent Venom and Beta Ray Bill came out, Guardians didn't have as many ways to throw terrain. So um, yeah, I mean, Angela, she's super good. Like, I wouldn't be against saying she's an S tier, but on the other hand, like, I don't want to put all our characters in S tier.
Well, why not?
uh, and she does get played like a little less, I feel like, than the other Guardians. So that's making me think maybe A tier. Um, I love Angela though; she's one of my favorite characters to
Yeah,
play.
we can leave her in A for Angela right now. Um, yeah. So one of the other things, kind of a theme with a lot of these other characters, especially Bill coming up next, is there's a lot of these God killer, Titan killer, uh, the big boy hunter uh, powers that this affiliation has, where she's adding her spender, she's adding dice based on opponent size, and she's one of many here that just loves to take down like the Malekiths of the table.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, next up, another character that we keep talking about every week, Beta Ray Bill. Um, he's affiliated in Guardians. Excellent all-rounder character. He's got size 4 throw. He's tough. His only action economy is moving short when he takes damage from somebody, when he gets attacked by somebody. Um, but uh, you know, that helps him get around, and then the medium move, medium base makes him pretty fast. Um, got some solid attacks, especially against flyers or large characters, like you mentioned. He's got to be an S tier. That size 4 throw really shored up one of the biggest things Guardians was missing. You're never going to go wrong taking him. He's just so good.
Yeah. Yeah. No arguments here. He was exactly what what the Guardians needed. um, but he is definitely part of the reason why non-Guardians players are having a rough time with Guardians lately. He, he's yeah, he's very much getting taken a lot of the time, just because I don't want to talk bad about Groot, but we were kind of missing a tank, like a true tank in this list. Groot can stay on the table, and we'll talk about him later. But Bill has that reduction, and he's got that honor bound, that, like you were saying, that advance when he's hit. So he's way more mobile than he ought to be, and he is doing a lot of dice. If you can spare the action economy, um, yeah, I mean he's great. He can go up and chase people down. He can sit on a point, hold his own. He's got the extra power. Yeah,
Yeah, and Groot often feels the need to kind of babysit Rocket, right? Whereas Beta Ray Bill, he can kind of rotate as needed a little
right.
bit easier. So um, yeah, the other thing about Bill, like in like criminals, for example, like I'll often have Bill in my 10, but I won't take him as much. I'll be like, okay, I'm kind of saving Bill for when I otherwise won't have a size 4 throw that I really need, or I'm up against Malekith. But in Guardians, when you give him the reroll token, his damage really goes up. Like his damage can kind of be mediocre in other affiliations, but I think that winging it token, um, especially if he's doing a spender on a flyer, he gets 4 rerolls in total, which is wild. It's hard to have a bad roll after that. So
Right. Or his was it God Hunter, where he's adding dice based on size. So if he is going up against that Malekith and he's, it starts at 5 dice and you're adding 3 or 4 dice to it and then re-rolling 2, and you're just setting yourself up for a guaranteed hit.
yeah.
I
All
say
right.
guaranteed because I have missed that. I have missed the 10 dice with the winging a token.
You have the skill to roll no damage on that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Um, all right. Well, this next character I think will be really exciting to talk about. They're going to be pure hot takes. I haven't played him at all yet.
Yeah.
But Cosmic Ghost Rider, the first 6 threat or higher coming to the affiliation. So he's kind of the first big bad that they're going to get. Uh, you know, he's really on theme with the rest of the affiliation. He's very damage focused. I think he's gonna really put even more gas in their tank. It's going to be interesting to see what some of the top Guardians players do with him, because we'll talk about this in the splash section. But Thanos often gets played in Guardians, and it's like, are you going to try to play Cosmic Ghost Rider and Thanos? Are you going to take one or the other? But yeah, I think he's going to be a menace. I think he's going to be S tier. You know, he's got the range for 6 dice energy attack, and his power mechanism at the start of each activation, he rolls dice. He'll randomly get some power. On average, like 2 or 3 power in addition to his 1 power for the turn. And then if he's sitting on at least 5 power at that point, he will not be able to score objectives at all. But in turn, he'll count skulls as successes. So that's going to make him really consistent with his damage. And then I think the superpowers he has are really going to kind of push him over the edge in terms of doing some crazy things. Do you want to talk about those, John?
Yes, because they are a ton of fun. So he's got a version of Hell on Wheels from the original Ghost Rider where he can spend X and place that far. So he can place up to 5 if he spends 5 power. So even just placing 1 on a 65 millimeter base is a huge movement, especially in the right situation. So having that place, we kind of talked about with Agent Venom, that place is huge for your action economy. He also can choose a character within 3 and push them towards himself short. They gain Incinerate. One thing I noticed fairly recently was that it doesn't say enemies. So you could potentially move your own characters. You can pull people off of points, push your own guys onto points with the right positioning. And then maybe you follow it up with a crew of the Milano and take off that incinerate. Or whatever the game plan calls for. Maybe you're moving the other Ghost Rider and he's immune. Um, yeah, so he's got the tools for the control side of it, I think, to play that objective game without actually interacting with the objectives. So he's definitely hitting hard, but he has the tools that are worth the sixth threat there to kind of not he's holding up his end of the control game as much as you need to play because obviously attrition is a great game plan, but you still have to it's about the crisis. You still have to play it somewhat and just not lose before you kill them.
Yeah, and that's a great segue. Maybe we should dwell on that for a second before we keep going
Yeah,
through the characters. I totally agree with you. I think that Chains of Sidorak power is crazy.
busted already.
Yeah, you're pulling someone and you're incinerating them, so you're like playing both sides of the coin. You're helping to kill them and you're getting them off the point. Um, the one thing holding him back is that his attack it's a gainer. It just gives him one power. He can't get multiple power off of it. So he's not going to have infinite power to do everything he wants. Luckily for the rest of us.
My my
But
goal my goal when I get this box and get him on a table is to have that lucky power phase where so he rolls 5 dice in the power phase and for certain triggers he can get up to 1 power per die. Um, yeah, so there's a chance that at the beginning of turn 1 he's sitting on I think it's 6 power. It is his normal power and then he can gain 5. So there's a chance that you you can get that 12 dice spender off turn 1.
sweet,
So
sweet.
I
Yeah,
that's I don't care what it takes, but we'll be doing that.
it'll happen eventually. But yeah, but the segue I wanted to mention. So what you said about playing the control side of the game, I think that's really important to kind of talk about for a second. You know, yes, like your goal with Guardians is to roll dice, do damage, but that doesn't mean your goal is to always win just by tabling your opponent. This isn't a game of Warhammer or something. Like you are doing that damage in order to score points. You're saying like, okay, if I damage your character and daze them, they drop the extract, and I'm able to hold the secure. Um, and so having some throws, having some pushes, like they can really help a lot. They can help you stay even on points in the first couple rounds and then start to pull ahead as you do more damage and take your opponent's models off the board. um, that's kind of the game plan with Guardians. Would you agree with that, John? Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. Well, just kind of from like a newer player perspective, that was kind of what I struggled with at first was um knowing the kind of the balance there between control and attrition, because I think we just kind of get caught up in what those terms mean. Really, there's a very large variety of ways to play the game. Thankfully, because that's what makes everybody unique and fun and interesting. Um, yeah, so you don't necessarily have to win secures, you don't have to win extracts. You just can't really lose. So Guardians players, you're usually not going to have priority outside of turn 1, maybe, just because you're generally going wide unless you're playing a different kind of Guardians that we'll talk about. But if you are playing wide, you have enough people to pick up those extracts. Say if there's an odd number, you can at least only be 1 behind. You might miss out on that middle objective, but you have the bodies to stand on points. And what better way to play Guardians than to get everybody on points and just stand around shooting? um, cut to the meat the clip from the new Guardians movie where Groot's just standing in a circle with all the guns. Um, but yeah, so it's definitely important not to get behind. You definitely like the slow scoring crises, but you know, just the nature of the game, you're going to play on some other ones. Every now and then, you're going to play on is it Scoundrels, where there's 5 secures and they all have cover, and that's just a terrible day for my deadly duo. um,
Yeah.
or you play into some criminals or something, and then suddenly everybody has stealth and you can't hit them. Uh, you definitely you definitely need to keep the control game in mind and just kind of hope to at least keep parity and only stay one or two behind on VP.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money there. I think Scoundrels is probably the worst crisis for Guardians, although they can go really wide, and sometimes
Hmm.
your opponent went too tall, you can surprise them
Yeah,
there.
that was
But
that was the first game I played where I didn't take Rocket and Groot together. Uh, it's like, you know what? I'm just not going to be able to get my deadly duo. I'm just going to try Groot by himself, and it blew my mind. It's like I can take someone other. Um, not to diss my boy Rocket. We'll make sure he's S tier.
but uh, but yeah, and actually bringing up the crisis, you reminded me. We've had a couple comments asking to like mention which crises we think are the best for an affiliation. So yeah, I would agree with you. I think all the low scoring crises are the best for Guardians because the fewer objectives there are, the easier it is to stay even on them, or maybe only 1 point behind if you're against like a really objective focused team. And then as you do damage and kill your opponent's models, you're going to naturally catch up. And having the lower scoring crises makes it easier to do that. So like, demons downtown, um, uh, Montesi formula only has 3 extracts. Alien ship has 3 extracts. Legacy virus has 3 extracts. Um, those are some of the main ones that come to mind for me. Any other favorite crises for you, John, for Guardians?
Well, I mean, you pretty much hit them all. For a while, I was enjoying Infinity Formula, but I've kind of moved off of it just because I don't know. You kind of some of those is it the B shape that has the like four, or it's kind of two on either side. Sometimes that's a little spread out for me. You have you're going wide, you can send half of your team to either side. And that's usually not a problem. But if you're playing something where it's more concentrated in the middle, maybe you're okay with it being a little faster scoring because everyone's clumped up and you can get off those beams and those double taps and the deadly duos and all of that. So maybe sometimes you're happier with playing something more central. It's kind of why you're okay with demons downtown incinerating your team as well, because if everyone's incinerated, you kind of have an advantage because you're hitting harder and kind of getting more out of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, cool. I'm glad we talked about that for a second. But do you agree, Cosmic Ghost Rider? We think he's going to be S tier.
I think he's going to be S tier. Um, I am prepared for him to be more like tier. So kind of go into um, you kind of have a contingency for other teams that you could play. And one of the things when I started playing, like one of the biggest splashes was Hulk. And you kind of have this game plan where it's either everybody in your team needs to hit him and concentrate fire on him, or nobody hits him and just starve him out. And I kind of see Cosmic Ghost Rider hitting that same problem where everyone will either just focus him down and get rid of him because he doesn't have that deal with the devil kind of uh, safety net, or he's not going to get hit and he's kind of going to run out of power. He could be flush with power with his funky generation at the power phase, or he could just flub on that roll and then only get 2 power from double tapping his Hellfire blasters. Um, I could see it being easy to shut him down. Is the only thing that's keeping me from saying 100% S tier right off the bat. Um, Maybe I'm just tempering my expectations so that when he's amazing, I can be more ecstatic about it.
Yeah, no, that's really true. His power is going to be inconsistent, and that's going to be even more than like how his dice rolls are. I think you're right that how much power he rolls is really going to swing how strong he is from turn to turn. And um, he's not unkillable. He has good defenses, but he is 6 threat, so he's worth putting the resources into. So yeah, you may be right. And when you have such a high threat character like this, he's competing against all the unaffiliated high threat characters who we know are insanely good. So
Right.
we'll see how things go. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll put him S tier for now. Just I guess I think Agent Venom was at the very bottom, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That
Um,
was.
yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. Maybe we'll have an update video after a while, with some of these characters and just what were we thinking? Um, all right.
Drax. So, um, I think Drax perfectly respectable character. I do think he's one of the weaker guardians, which being a weak guardian is not a bad place to be in.
Right.
But he's on a small base with a medium move and no action economy. So I think that's the biggest thing holding him back. Um, for a 3 threat, he really is pretty durable and still hits pretty hard. I think his favorite spot to be in is kind of off to the side in a one-on-one against someone who's not like throwing him away and who is just kind of trading blows with him. Because if he gets hit, he hits back with 3 extra dice. So he's throwing out like this 8 dice attack, which is super good. It's just, how often does that situation actually come up versus like, he just gets dazed off of his weak mystic defense, or he just gets thrown away and doesn't really get to do much. Um, what do you think, John?
Yeah, definitely agree with all of that. Him getting thrown is basically a stagger, especially if it's greater than a short throw. Um, yeah, he can be frustrating to play, I will say. Just everything is range 2, so he's not really he really has to get in there. Yeah, I mean, for a 3 threat, he hits really hard. If he is off there 1v1ing some like the Logans of the world or somebody, he's going to hold his own, even as a 3 threat, because he does have a damage reduction to a minimum of 1, which is I think the only one before Bill showed up. Um, he has a ton of dice. If he gets hit first, he's hitting you with an extra 3, plus he's adding on his spender, he's adding a die for every damage that he has. So he's sitting at I think 6 healthy, I think 6 on the other side as well. Yeah, 6 and 6. So you could add up to 5 dice plus that 3. You could potentially add 8 under the right circumstances. Um, Maybe I'm just trying to hype myself up before we place him on a tier, but uh, yeah, he has the potential to not be fun, but he also has the potential to just be wild. I mentioned that first game I didn't take Rocket and Groot together because I was playing on Scoundrels. He absolutely crushed it. He just went up and sat on the middle objective there, and he was just hitting and throwing everything, and just kind of throwing a tantrum, and it was amazing. But yeah, he can definitely be countered pretty easily.
Yeah, and I think what you said there is totally true. Like, if you're trying to go super wide with Guardians, if you think that's something you might be doing, like having Drax in your list makes total sense because he's the only affiliated 3 threat other than Groot. And you can always throw Bucky in. But if you just want to spam threes and Rocket, um, Drax could definitely make it into your list for that reason.
For sure.
I think he's a B tier.
Yeah, I
I-
usually have him in my list. And we'll kind of talk about it with the splashes, but taking 10 Guardians is a great list.
yeah,
Right now there's only 10 currently out, so if you just take those 10 and you're having a good time, you're having fun, everyone has their place.
yeah, yeah. One thing I'll say about Drax is that when he wakes up from being dazed, it is not your usual like really strong
Unlimited
retaliation.
power.
Right. Yeah, he's like all this power, but he doesn't have any damage. And so his whole kit is based on like having damage and being damaged. So his
Yeah.
spender, like literally, if he wakes up from being dazed, his spender is only 2 dice. Uh,
Yeah,
so that's
that's
a
rough.
yeah, yeah. But I know you love Gamora, John. I think Gamora is an awesome character. So
Yes, for sure. Um, you know, outside of Angela, she's the only log mover that can pick stuff up. Sorry, Nebula. So she's also great on objective, kind of like what we talked about earlier with the attrition game, but still wanting to keep parity with everything. Um, she's definitely fitting that game plan. She's the deadliest woman in the galaxy for a reason. Stealth is absolutely huge on this gun line, just because she needs to get up in your face to hit you. She doesn't have the range that some of the other characters have, but she can throw herself in and deal damage with that assassin leap. She's re-rolling, uh, well, she's re-rolling with winging it tokens, but then she's changing some of those dice to hits if she gets wilds. So she's just putting out a lot of damage, just kind of taking that dice variation and making it a little bit more consistent on top of the winging it tokens. Um, Surprisingly tanky if you have the power for her, not martial artist, the other one, martial prowess. If you have the two power for that one, and suddenly you're rolling 5 dice for your defense, like that's great. Um, yeah, absolutely love Gamora. She's definitely pretty. She's like the Swiss Army knife in my game plan more often than not, just because she can be in a big fight with everybody right in the middle, and I'm also okay with her just going off to the side and doing her own thing for a while. She's going to hold her own, and if she's off to the side, other people aren't hitting her from across the board. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of her.
yeah, she's got that 6 dice strike, which is pretty great. Um, I agree with all that. I think she's very like if she's caught in the wrong position, she can be really fragile and kind of just die. Like if she doesn't have the power for martial prowess and she's um, inside of her stealth bubble. Um, but she's really good at what she does. Like if your opponent's trying to run away with the character who like grabbed an extract and they're just running, I mean, she can totally run them down. Long move, leap into them, do some damage, hit them for 6 dice. Like now I've stolen your extract back. So I think she's really good at that.
Yeah, when you have
Um,
that lizard that's trying to run away with 4 hammers.
yeah.
Jimmy did that to me once. Feels bad.
um, yeah, and I agree. Like if you do throw her into the middle of things, she's jumping in there with the whole rest of your team, and just contributing even more dice, and hopefully you come out on top. So, yeah, I think she feels like an A tier to me. Like I think she's usually in your 10.
Yeah. I will say she's always in my 10. I don't know. Sometimes I just have more other things that I want to play over her, which is why I would say A tier. Just because sometimes she can just fall off a cliff. Um, but yeah, whiffing on dice never feels good with anybody. But kind of like we said with Angela, she does Angela, no, she can kind of adjust that either way with the winging it tokens or on her own with her innates. Um, yeah, just solid, good, solid 4 threat.
All right. Well, one of my favorite characters, both
S plus.
in in the Marvel universe and in this game, is Groot. The only 3 threat character with 7 stamina. Um, just an awesome piece for the affiliation. I think he's S tier. Um, you know, he has some weaknesses, like he's on the slow side. His energy defense is only 2 dice, but I think he's just so good at what he does, which is just hold down a secure heal himself. Um, sometimes potentially trade way up by using his spender on a higher threat character. His spenders, it's like 5 power, but it's an automatic stagger
which is
and a
huge.
throw.
And the throw doesn't have a size restriction.
Yeah. Um, and then, of course, he makes Rocket almost invulnerable sometimes, which is really valuable. So I think all that together, added to the fact that he's only 3 threat, so it lets you easily splash high threat characters, I think makes him S tier.
Yeah, yeah, definitely agree with all that. His strikes are better now. He got, I'll say, fixed last year. um, uh, so his strike has that range 3 now instead of range 2, um, which just feels a lot better. Like you said, his stagger is, or his spender is really good with the stagger. Um, but yeah, if he's just sitting on a point and someone goes and throws him off the point, I mean, he's really more than happy to just double move back on that point because he's going to have to double move. But he's more than happy to just double move back on it, heal himself, and then give them root. I feel like I don't use the root nearly enough. Like that 2 power root, um, it's pretty wild what it does. So like you're making another character spend an extra power every time they use an ability, right? So especially if you can get that on someone early and just kind of prevent them from, you know, if there's a 2, it's an Asgardian that wants to, do that two cost power every turn. Suddenly they're gonna have to do something different before they can just have that for free. Um,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. I sometimes I almost forget he even has the root on top of everything else. And that ability, or that condition, I should say, is almost the same as like a stagger on certain characters. Um, just because some characters just want to do like 2 or 3 superpowers in a turn.
hmm
They can't pay that massive tax. So
right.
um, I do like to, Rocket and Groot, they tend to go together. Um, I think a good setup is having Groot um, sort of forward of the point, kind of like standing closer to the enemy, and then Rocket standing back behind the point, shooting. And, that kind of intuitively makes sense because Groot is the tank, but it also means if your opponent is going to try to throw Groot, which is a good way to deal with Groot, is throwing him. Um, they can't just throw him straight backwards because he'll hit Rocket, and Rocket doesn't take collision damage. So they kind of have to throw him sideways. They're usually not going to want to throw him into the middle of the board because he's just going to do more things there. So you can do some nice positioning things with the 2 of them. And especially if there's like terrain in the mix, you can really limit the throw options for Groot. So
Yeah, for sure. So where does he go up here? I would, since Cosmic Ghost Rider is untested by us at least, I would put Groot ahead of him for now, tentatively.
yeah, yeah, man, we are stacking up the S tiers here.
Yeah, I almost
uh,
want to put Agent Venom back down to A tier, but
yeah, no, I mean I think they deserve it. These are good characters. So um, Nebula, a really cool 2 threat character.
yeah,
She's
I
really,
love 2 threats.
yeah, yeah. Not a lot of affiliations have multiple 2 threats like this. That's a cool thing about Guardians. She doesn't count at all for objectives, but the trade-off there is that she gets to, have her damage spiked way up for a 2 threat. So um, let me make sure I'm getting this right, John. So she can re-roll any number of dice as long as she's attacking someone who is
Holding or contesting.
contesting
Yep.
or holding an objective. Yeah, so that just makes her super consistent with her damage. And you don't have to give her a winging it token. You can,
Right.
she doesn't need it. Other people can get the tokens.
Right.
So
So winging it tokens you can use attack, defense, or dodges. And she can reroll all of her attack dice most of the time, because that's kind of how you're using her, is going against some of those characters that are just sitting on points. Um, She's rerolling all her attack dice. She gets a reroll on defense just for free, and she's healing 1 at the start of her activation. It'd be really cool if she had healing factor, but it's, I guess not. It's a little bit different, but more or less the same thing. But yeah, so for a 2 threat, she's just hitting so hard. Like, I don't know if we can really overstate how hard she actually hits just based on her size. Long mover, so just like Gamora, you're not gonna get away from her really. She has a place within 1 on her spender, I believe. Um, which the only real gripe I have about her entire card is that the Shock Sword Assault gives out stun, and her strike gives out shock.
Oh.
But no, stun is wild for this affiliation. Just as much as you want to hit people, it just really limits their options coming back at you. So having a 2 threat that at least has access to that, it's behind her spender, so it's not going to be like a turn 1 necessarily to turn 2 play, but it is an option for her. But yeah, just sending her pretty much wherever. She doesn't add dice based on character size, but she's definitely one of those characters that can really hunt down the big guys on the table.
Yeah, I play against Guardians more often than I play them, and whenever Nebula is on the board, she's just such a annoying problem to solve because she's only 2 threats. So yes, she only has 4 health, so you can dace her and get her KO'd if you really want to, but how much
At what cost?
threat? Yeah, what costs? Like you're probably spending more than 2 threat on doing that.
Hmm.
And then if you do ignore her, eventually her power builds up, and then she double spenders a 4 or a 5 threat and dazes them. Now your higher threat is going down to a 2 threat. So she's a tough one to deal with, and she's a great option for the affiliation. Um, I think she's like either top of A tier, bottom of S tier. Um, you know, she's only got 4 health, and she's can't score objectives, but she's really good at what she does. So
I lean towards S tier just because she's a 2 threat. Like you can
yeah,
you can fit her in pretty much any list you want. Um,
yeah. Why don't we call her S tier and bump down Agent Venom? Um,
there we go.
that's my feeling at least. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. All right, John, tell us why Rocket is a D tier.
All right. Here's why every list should have Rocket. He is a 2 threat, just like Nebula. He hits way harder than he has any right to. He has that range 5 on his builder and his spender, so he's is he the only size 1 character? He's only character that's always size 1, I will
Yeah,
say.
Ant-Man and
Ant-Man and
Wasp when
Wasp.
they transform. But
So he is tiny. He's got the defense of a size 1 character, but uh, he is way tankier than you would expect. He always has cover and he doesn't take collision damage, so you can't throw things at him. That cover is just like that auto success on his rolls. Is It comes up a lot more than you would expect it to. So when you do get through Groot to him, you're not always guaranteed to just do that 3 damage that takes to kill him. So at that point, you're kind of wasting strikes on a 2 threat, like you were talking about Nebula. Um, his guns are just amazing. His spender, where he can pull people off points if you can like line it up right and kind of hand out some auto damage, like chip damage to everybody. Um, it's kind of easy to get that wild trigger with the winging it tokens. And then my new favorite part of his card is the booby traps. So if you're just double plasma rifling his builder and you have the power for it, he's kind of sitting back a little bit. Maybe I don't know. Sometimes I end up playing him in front of Groot just to play my booby traps, but it just all comes down to positioning. But I love being able to kind of ward off bigger people. So if someone's down to 1 or 2 health, you really have to pay attention to those booby traps because it doesn't, he just has a 50-50 shot of doing 2 damage, I think, maybe. Um, yeah, he's just for the 2 threat again, he is just absolutely wild. I love splashing him everywhere just because he is again that 2 threat attrition piece. He doesn't always have to go up and do anything. He can just sit back and shoot all day, and he's good at it.
Yeah, I think the only thing he sometimes runs into is if he actually wants to move. If I mean five range 5, usually he's happy where he is, but if for some reason he does need to go somewhere else, it could be a little awkward because
Hmm.
you know, like if he goes out there by himself and doesn't have Groot anymore, he's very easily taken down. Um,
Right.
and then if Groot moves first, he's vulnerable for a period of time. But again, it's tricky. It's like you throw the 5 dice attack at him, hoping you daze him, and then you don't because of the cover.
Hmm.
Or you throw the 7 dice attack at him, and you're like, oh, why did I attack him with so many dice? But I usually err more towards the second option of just guaranteeing that I, daze him, even if it
Right.
takes some more resources. And then not to mention Deadly Duo is very good tactics cards. So is he
Yes.
our is he up there above Star Lord, John? What do you think?
He shouldn't be, but he is. um, I don't know. He's like I'm playing him every game. He is. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't play him every game, but I do, and I love it. Um, I don't know. Maybe I'll just defer to you since I'm clearly biased here. But where are you wanting Rocket Raccoon?
I mean, he's always in your 10. I I think you're gonna play him a lot. Um, I think whether you play him or Bill more often is just going to come down to which crises you're on and what opponents you're playing. So I think he's, either right above or below Bill. Um,
We'll put him standing next to Groot, like he should be.
Perfect. I like it.
I will say I am more likely in a Guardians list. Just like preface it with that. In a Guardians list, I am more likely to take Groot by himself than Rocket by himself. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's pretty much all I have for Rocket.
All right, sweet. Well, our final Guardians member, Ronan the Accuser. Um, he poor Ronan. I think he's outshone by the rest of his affiliation. But he's not a bad character, even despite that. He's a 4 threat unless you take him with the power gem. Um, he is on a medium base, so he's a little bit faster than average. But other than that, he doesn't have any action economy. He's got a size 4th row on his strike, which is pretty sweet. The issue is it's 5 dice and he needs to hit a wild. So he's a little inconsistent with that. He's got a nice range 4 attack, again, with a wild trigger for a push. Um, one thing about that is his range attack, it doesn't give him any power. I think if I was going to upgrade his kit, that I would probably add some power generation onto that range attack.
Like a gainer on his
Yeah,
universal weapon.
yeah. I know you had some success using him before Bill came out as like an anti big character because he
Mhm.
has that guaranteed, retaliation. Um, what do you think? Is he a C, John, or is he good enough to be a B?
Um, for a while, he was making my list because there were only 8 affiliated guardians, right? So I had 8 guardians, and then I had 2 splash options. And um, I don't know. I, in my head, I say C tier because I just it never really clicked to me how he was supposed to be used. Like he was great into Malekith at the time. Like I'm sure he still is. He still is good. Just because when he is dazed or KO'd, he gets that free attack against them. Um, which, if he is getting dazed, if someone spiked into him, then he has power to do his big uh, 8 dice or however many spender out of activation, which is huge that he can do that potentially twice. Um, but in reality, he's probably the first affiliated Guardian that I am dropping. So when Cosmic Ghost Rider comes out, if I still just want an all Guardians list, I think Ronin's probably the one that gets dropped first.
Yeah.
Like I said, he's never really clicked for me. But I will say that he has some good homes here. He definitely has some game plans where he shines. It's not always what I want when I'm playing.
All right. Well, he'll be our token C tier character then.
Which
So
I think I'm putting him C tier just for the sake of having a C tier. I think he is probably low B, because I think he works in most lists that you're putting together, but we're S heavy here, so C tier.
yeah, so man, what a top heavy tier list we've made here. But I really do feel like it's accurate. Guardians, they're one of the most competitive affiliations right now. Um, and it really just comes from the the depth of their roster. It's just one good character after another, and you have enough good characters all in the same affiliation, that affiliation becomes really good.
Hmm.
Um, not to say that they're like an anti-fun affiliation or anything though. I think they're great for like casual games and beginner players, like because they're just rolling dice. You're just gonna get in
Yeah.
there, you're gonna have a crazy game, roll dice at each other. And I've beaten Guardians a good number of times. Daredevil with criminals can throw down some good damage back, and we'll get it more into this later. But sometimes Guardians players don't quite expect to be the ones having their characters dying. So they're not unbeatable.
You hit him with that Uno reverse. All right.
um,
Yeah, I think we can move on to our splashes. Um, Typically we go alphabetical order here, but we put two at the beginning just because they kind of change who the Guardians are. You want to walk us through Thanos? Kind of, he requires more than just being a good splash. He fundamentally changes the entire way that you're playing the game. So, walk us through some Thanos.
Yeah, so you could probably write a PhD dissertation on Thanos in Guardians if you wanted to. So we'll just try to hit the highlights here. I'll say adding Thanos to Guardians, they are no longer a beginner team at that point. They are an expert level team.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanos, he's going to be 8 threat with his 2 infinity gems that he brings. And when you have that much threat bundled up into one character, especially a character with so many decisions to make, it is very easy to misplay, and you'll wish that you had, Agent Venom and Beta Ray Bill instead. But in the hands of really seasoned characters, Thanos with Guardians has been one of the more like dominant teams in the metagame recently. Um, and Guardians have been very successful without Thanos and with Thanos. It's two very different styles of play. Um, I know you usually go more towards the go wide list, John, and I think that is the more common way that they're played. Like I run into that more than I run into the Thanos list. Um, but the reason the Thanos list is so scary is because it gives the Guardians player so many options. Usually he has the space gem and the reality gem, and he is very fast because he can move medium on his medium base and then move like place himself 2 with the space gem. And then he starts moving other people around with his cosmic portal. So he's got a range 4, place someone 2, and he can do that to enemies or allies. So, I mean, just the number of options that creates is insane. Whether you're bumping up an ally so they could do something they normally couldn't do, or if you're moving an enemy closer. Um, and then when he gets in range 2, he hits really hard with 6 dice and a throw. Um, and when you have 8 threat and 1 character, you have a lot fewer characters. So, like what you said about running into the priority problem, attrition teams like having priority, and when you're going wide with Guardians, you lose it really quickly. Having Thanos solves that problem. You get to go first. You get to KO their character who had a lot of power and deny them ever getting to use them. And I know I'm talking for a long time here, but he, along with Mystique here, Mystique, the main thing to talk about with her is just that she has deception, which turn one, you can pull someone in equal to their speed. And with Thanos and Mystique combined, it just becomes a really scary kidnap mechanism where your opponent just can't, even if they send up a tanky character like Lizard, like if he moves up to the midline, grabs an extract, he is just walking right into the enemy team and getting dazed and giving them that extract, So yeah, that's why Thanos is so scary. I am not, I don't play a ton of Thanos Guardians. I'm not an expert on.
I did it once and I had no idea what I was doing.
I
was not prepared for the options that he brings to the table. The Death's Decree though is really nice. I think that's the one where he's other people are adding dice to their attacks, which is exactly what the Guardians want. Winging it tokens on top of that is massive. Plus, you're a pretty tall list at that point. You don't have as many characters, and a higher percentage of your squad is getting those tokens. So it's pretty consistent across the board.
Yeah.
So
if Nebula gets dazed, and then you Death's Decree her at 4 dice and she rerolls them all, it's wild. Yeah, I mean for sure S tier. You can't just throw him into your Guardians list. He kind of totally changes your strategy.
Plus, like you said, you're pretty much guaranteed to be running 2 Infinity Gems on him. Typically Space Reality, but there are some arguments for some of the others. So you are losing out on 2 of your restricted cards, but a lot of the time it's worth it for him.
Yeah, and you can go ahead and put Mystique S tier.
Yes.
She's mostly there for deception. Remind me, does Foreign Assignment have to be played during Agent Venom's turn, or can it be played during?
Let me open it up. It's active for sure.
Let's see.
Yeah, it's during Agent Venom's activation.
Okay. All right. So there aren't any shenanigans there with Mystique denying defensive
right.
check, but yeah. The last thing I'll say about Thanos, a lot of times the classic way to play Thanos is to go last with him and like rearrange the whole board and score a bunch of points, and that's often not how you play him in Guardians. He activates earlier in Guardians a lot of the time. Not all the time, but it is something that you can definitely do. Go first or second with him and get some good dazes off. And something like Criminal Syndicate, like Jimmy got 3rd at Nova last year with Thanos and Criminal Syndicate. And, that strategy is very different. He was going last with Thanos pretty much every round and using him for control. This approach, you're using him more for attrition. So
for sure. Again, the only other thing I want to say about Mystique, I guess I made it sound like she changes the Guardian's playstyle more than she actually does. She has that huge deception piece, which even if you aren't getting it off immediately, it's still a threat, right? Like if it doesn't happen immediately, your opponent is having to play around that and kind of play super cautious. So depending on their play style and like what they're actually going for that game, it can be huge, just the threat of it. Once that happens, she's fine. She's a good objective player. She has some where she like blows up the terrain is good, and the stealth and the martial artist are really good as well. So she's not as quite as attrition focused, but she's a solid piece after she gets off that probably huge play for your team. All right, and here's where I get my revenge for the Midnight Suns episode, where Jimmy put Ghost Rider in what, C tier, maybe B tier. I love him. Now, maybe he's not S tier now that there's an affiliated Ghost Rider, but I love him in Guardians. And that is the frame of reference for these videos is what in this affiliation, what are they? I would say he's S tier because you're always going wide unless you know have a specific game plan. But when you are going wide, he's just getting that much more power per turn if they're attacking all your other characters or they're just focusing him. Um, he has crazy mobility with his Hell on Wheels. He's just darting all over the board. I don't usually take his the one where he chains you, Highway to Hell. I don't usually take that with him, but it's not a bad option by any means. But deal with the devil. You know, you have two affiliated two threats that you can take out there, and if you're going super wide, it's a good chance you have both of them anyway. So you have options there for him to deal with the devil on a two threat. So you're really just staying ahead of your opponent on the threat game. Um, he does a ton. His pendant stare is great for the big baddies like the Guardians like to take down. You know, flipping them to their injured side without power is probably huge, depending on the situation. So yeah, I love him in Guardians. He's a cool model. Like I really enjoyed putting him together and painting him up. Um, yeah, take that, Jimmy.
Yeah, and you know, I mentioned it in our last video. I do think Guardians is the best home for Ghost Rider because he's all about attrition, and Guardians just really, you know, they support that plan wholeheartedly for him. And what you said about Guardians being wide with him, 100% true. Not only for his power generation, but also for his deal with the devil card. It when you've got like two threats running around, it's you know pretty much guaranteed he has a good target for deal with the devil. Um, so yeah, I think he's really solid splash for Guardians. You know, as more and more of these high threat characters come out, he might not make every Guardians list, but really scary to see when he shows up. So
Yeah. I can't remember if I said it during Cosmic Ghost Riders card, but I will be running two Ghost Riders at some point, just for fun, just to see what it's like having the two of them just zooming around. I have a feeling that's just going to be insane.
I think
Maybe
it
not
might be pretty
as
good. Yeah,
competitive, but like, oh man, it's gonna be fun to say the least.
it may
Um,
very well be competitive. Yeah,
yeah.
but
Speaking
yeah.
of
So
fun, yeah. So next up we have Hulk, and before we really get into him, so three of these first four are they're big characters, five threat and up. So what, five, six, and eight is typically how you're playing them. Um, which I think just speaks to the Guardians that you know their two, three, four threats are so solid that when you're splashing, you're just splashing in the big ones because that's all you need. Like, you know, you don't splash in your lizards of the game because, you know, the rest of your affiliation is kind of holding that up pretty well. So it leaves room for your Hulks. At the beginning of my time at MCP, I didn't really get why Hulk was in every list. Playing Guardians just after all of the erratas and you know the Malekith fixes and everything when they really took off again. Um, it was really easy for me to just focus down Hulk. Uh, but then I realized that, you know, if six players on your side of the board are shooting Hulk, then everyone else on the table is doing what they want. And it's true on the other side. So Hulk can go in and smash first and foremost. He can take the hits pretty well, and it's just going to make him angrier. Um, yeah, he if they ignore him, he's kind of the control piece that you're I won't say missing anymore, but for a while it was what the Guardians were missing, and it's what they want to do, or it's what they need him to do. So if they ignore him, he's more mobile than he has any right to be, which is pretty big for them. He can get around, hop around, pick up all the different hammers, and just put a hurt on somebody.
yeah, you're 100% right there. You know, Hulk is really scary. Opponent's got to have a good plan for him. You don't want to just kind of willy-nilly do 12 damage to him and let him start throwing 10 dice strikes around. You really,
Yeah.
people are ready for Hulk now. Often they are like locked in and they're like, all right, I know how to take down Hulk, just because he's been so common. And with Bill being out now, Guardians aren't as desperate for a size 4 throw anymore. So I think that has kind of led to Hulk being played less, but he's still a really good one to take for Guardians. I think we could throw him in, A tier maybe.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with Hulk though. Yeah.
Several months ago, he definitely would have been S tier, but now I think there are better options. But he's still a fun model. Like if you have the model, and you've got him painted up, he's definitely a fun one to get on the table. Thematically, I'm going for a Gladiator Hulk on mine, just from the Planet Hulk series. Is just like top tier comic book shenanigans. But I'm working on that hobby wise, so can't wait to get him on the table.
Yeah, and then this next one, I was just trying to think of more offbeat characters you don't see in Guardians very much, just to try to kind of throw something out there. And Guardians are so good at picking a target and killing them that there might be something there with Killmonger's Usurp the Throne card, just to get you 2 extra victory points. The rest of the team can really support it really well. There's probably better, more competitive options. But Killmonger, he's all about damage, and that's what Guardians are all about. So I think they could be a good home for him. He might be B tier splash for them.
Yeah, I definitely like the VP play there because he's holding his own with the attrition game plan. But if you are managing to kind of keep that parity, just down maybe an extract and tying everything else, that 2VP could be huge. Like you could be swinging it back in your favor. And if you have the same problems that I do playing and you're about to time out on your game in the tournament hall, it's nice to throw that extra 2VP out there and take the lead right before the judge tells you to hurry it up. And why do you have 6 or 7 activations?
Yeah. So when do you like to play Lockjaw in Guardians, John?
Ever since I got the Lockjaw model. So just kind of with some of these big models here, he helps with some of the movement issues, or even just the general attrition issues where you want to double tap every round. So giving someone a range 3 place is just massive for, say, Groot's gonna run up and you can just place Rocket up by Groot, and then Rocket can double tap from a new position and he's within range of everybody. Yeah, so he's not as played anymore now that I've kind of rounded out. I played him a lot with Ronin. I think he solved a lot of Ronin and to an extent Drax's issues around action economy. That's kind of where I played him the most. And a lot of that has kind of fallen out as I stopped playing those 2 in particular. But kind of like Hulk and Ghost Rider, I just love the model. He's just a good boy. I took one of the set terrain pieces with the lamp post and I put that in his mouth with some wires coming out of it. And, oh, he's just fun. Give him a try if you haven't. Yeah, so I'll say B tier just because he fits a specific game plan. He's not necessarily part of your super wide team. When he gets killed, it's like, why are you hitting my dog? But he is a good time. What did I say the kitchen tier was? C. I think he's slightly above that. You're not playing him solely to have a good time with your friends. Like he has a place and he has a purpose for some other things, but kind of have to set out for it.
Yeah, I love what you did with his model with the lamp from the core set. It was a great touch. That's awesome.
Finally got me to paint some core set terrain.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about getting your hits in round one. I sometimes if you don't have any movement shenanigans, you're kind of just setting up your positioning in round one, and that's what the scenario like scenario focused control teams want, is like they don't want that pressure on round one. They just want to get their victory points and feel good. When Lockjaw is throwing someone up there, you could put that pressure on right from the start.
Yeah.
So
And I guess I did forget the one of the more overlooked, but still just as important for the attrition game plan. His Bloodhound ability, interdimensional Bloodhound, where you kind of mark somebody, uh, and everyone else gets an additional die, which on top of winging it tokens, like I mean, just on its own that's big, but on top of the winging it tokens, you can make it a little bit more consistent. Yeah, he's just a good boy.
and then our good old trusty Winter Soldier here. I think he's gonna be S tier, A tier. He is a very consistent damage dealer at 3 threat. And Guardians love going wide. They love having high damage characters, so he
Hmm.
fits right in. He could feel a little redundant with Rocket sometimes, I think.
Hmm.
But
I would not take them both, for instance, usually.
yeah. I mean, just depending, whatever threat level you're at and
Hmm.
what you're playing against. I think if you're seeing a lot of stealth characters across the board, or if there's going to be a lot of cover, you
Hmm.
know, I would maybe think twice about him, especially if you're going to bring Rocket and Star Lord. But still, a super good character. Fits well with the Guardians. So
Yeah. Yeah, I would lean toward A tier just for Guardians because they do have those other tools at their disposal. Um, like you said, he is an extra threat rocket. Um, with his rogue agent. Uh, I don't think that gives him access to like lovable misfits or anything, but it does help with your roster construction there, which is usually not an issue with Guardians rosters, but with Thanos lists in particular, he can kind of make the numbers work there. Um, yeah, if there was ever a scenario where you want to take Rocket and not Groot, maybe try Winter Soldier. I think he's on his own. He doesn't necessarily have the same drawbacks that you would with Rocket. But
well,
yeah,
cool.
so there's our splashes. Hopefully, some a handful of the little bit more unconventional ones. We try to bring you guys. But then obviously it's very hard to talk about Guardians without Thanos in this day and age. We'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah. Well, cool. Let's jump into the tactics cards here. So, um, you know, Guardians, they have some real bangers, but especially if you're taking Thanos, he's taking up both your restricted slots with the
Mhm.
Reality Gem and Space Gem. They're not like flush for tactics cards necessarily. They're not in a situation like Shield or something, but Crew of the Milano I think is a really good one. Um, it so it lets you remove status conditions. So any number of Guardians of the Galaxy characters can pay a power, and they remove all status conditions that they have, and they can't. I'm actually just reminding myself of this. They can't even get any more status conditions for the rest of the round.
Yes,
So,
which is a huge part of it for sure.
yeah. um, I think I think we can say it's S tier in that you're probably bringing it in all your Guardians lists. I don't know that you're gonna play it every time.
Yeah,
Um, what
I
do you
I
think,
lean
John?
towards A tier just because I think it has a place and it's not necessarily every game thing. Um, for a while, I took lovable misfits and Crew of the Milano every single game because lovable misfits is just a wild card. Um, and now with foreign assignment too, you kind of have those just uh, wall of text cards to go through. Um, but I love to follow up lovable misfits with Crew of the Milano if I get that stun. So if like the stun goes off and you stun your team, you're playing mostly Guardians. We talked it in the splashes. If you are mostly just affiliated Guardians, you can kind of fix the mistakes of lovable misfits. which can be, a pretty heavy premium to take 2 cards for one activation, Um, but I do love Brew of the Milano on demons, which we talked about was a great crisis for Guardians. Um, I had a game and it worked out so well for me. I played Guardians on Demons Downtown against Hydra. So that turn where all of Hydra was incinerated and my team could not have conditions put on them, it was just like, oh my gosh, just a field day for them. Just do whatever they wanted. But I will say A tier, just I don't know. Conditions are huge in this game. Um, I'm leaning towards A tier just because you're not going to take it every game. It's a little bit crisis and opponent dependent. But another fun one, Daughters of Thanos. This is Gamora and Nebula. One of them makes an attack and the other one follows up. Um, I will say I don't get this one on the table as often as I should, even if I'm playing Gamora and Nebula. Um, just because, if they're both long movers, I tend to send them up different sides of the table, just to go up and hit different things. If you're playing a Thanos, which I guess is the theme of this card, if you're playing against Thanos, you're going to send them up into the same opponent. I think it's huge in that respect. You send Gamora up, and she attacks. Nebula comes up and follows, and then pays this after they've both attacked, and then Gamora gets another free attack. I enjoy it, but like I said, I don't play it as much as I could, which makes me lean towards B tier. Like free attack is nice, but you're paying 4 power for that one attack. I'm kind of leaning B tier.
Yeah, I think it's good when it's good, but you're jumping through a lot of hoops. You got to have two specific characters in your list. They have to both be within a certain range of the target, unless you're comboing it with like follow me, whichever one went up there first has to survive until the next one goes. So the ceiling is high, but it's at pretty high risk of either just not even being takeable with the roster you build, or even if you do have both characters, it might not work out like you hope it does. So
Yeah.
still a good, decent card though.
And
So.
kind of just to talk about Guardians in general here. So there are some Guardians cards, and then I would say most of these are character dependent. So when you are taking your list, like I'm always taking lovable misfits just because it's what I want to play in Guardians. Like that's the play style that I'm going for. You wing it, you just roll the die, see what happens, and it's going to be a ton of fun unless it isn't. But more often than not, it is just a lot of fun. So whenever you are picking your list, and then more importantly, when you are cutting your 10 down to 5 for a game, you're taking some of these, but you're mostly just taking character cards. I feel like there are some generic ones that you can do. Like I love the follow me play on pretty much anyone really. Like an Angela into whoever after she's just like absolutely done her thing and really cleaned up the table. Um, but having the options there for all those character cards really lets you kind of change it up every single game depending on who you're putting on the table. So yeah, just to clarify, like Daughters of Thanos could end up on the table more often than I use it, just because you have those options for those character cards. But speaking of the best character card in the game, Deadly Duo. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it in S tier. Yeah, I mean, what more is there to say other than they are the Deadly Duo? Rocket and Groot each spend some power, and Rocket makes an extra 3 out of action economy attacks against 3 different characters. I mean, he is just spreading the hurt around the table, on top of already potentially double tapping. So you can get 5 builders off in a turn. So after the first couple, you've probably got power to do your spender. You can't use the spender in the Deadly Duo, but if you're timing it like beginning of turn 2, kind of you've got your power unless you did some objective plays or something. But typically it is that turn 2 play where he is just getting ready to absolutely shred. Um, can you think of any downsides to S tier in the Deadly Duo?
No, it's definitely an S tier. It, I mean, the number of extra attacks is just so good, and you don't even need all three targets for it to be good. I sometimes you only have one target, but if it means you're going to daze them, it's worth it, you know.
Right.
It also it it gives Rocket so much power. It has some kind of wild combo potential where you chain it into Follow Me, and then you know, if you follow it up with the next card we're going to talk about, Foreign Assignment, the the amount of stuff you can do before your opponent gets an activation can get a little absurd. So yeah, so Foreign Assignment, I'll this is one I have to just read it every time because it's got so much going on. So I'm just gonna so during Agent Venom's turn, he can spend any amount of power. For every 2 power spent, he has like all these options, and the options depend on which guardians are within range 2 of him. So if Gamora is near him, um, he throws himself a medium. If he's near Groot, he can heal. If he's near Star Lord, he gets um,
Star-Lord's gun, right?
yeah. So he shoots with Star Lord's spender, and he gets to move. So I think that's the best one out of all of them.
Hmm.
Um, let's see, if he's near Rocket, um, he gets to attack and move. Like Agent Venom gets to attack and move. And then if he's near Drax, he's thrown and counts as size 3. So I mean, just I think the thing you see most often is like Rocket plays Deadly Duo, plays Follow Me, Agent Venom goes, and he's near at least Star Lord and gets to do a full auto and move,
Hmm.
and then do a soul activation on top of that. Which, you know, sure, the stars aren't always going to fully align with that, but when it does, it is terrifying to behold. And as a criminal syndicate player, I'm sitting there with my shadow organization, and I'm looking very carefully at the layout of the Guardian pieces, and I'm saying, okay, am I at risk of having my whole board blown up here? Do I need to put up my force fields? You know. So I think it's an S tier card. What do you think, John?
I think so. I mean, a vast majority of these effects are worth the 2 power, right? It's like you have to choose everything up front, right? So you kind of have to set it up, which is, I guess, the biggest downside is if you're probably not going to get you're not going to use every single option. Threat wise, I don't know that that works out, but I'd have to do the math. Um, but yeah, just getting 2 of these options, like that's great. Like that's worth the card. Like Star Lords is worth just that by itself, I would think. And then anything else is just icing on the cake. So yeah, I definitely agree with S tier. Plus that it's just fun, just classic Guardians.
Yeah. Awesome and fun. Those are the 2 words I'd say for Guardians. So
Yeah,
yeah, Infinity Gem power. We wanted to talk about this. That was a good call to include that here, John. You know, Star Lord and Ronan can take it. Bottom line, I don't think it's worth it on either of them. Um, you know, you're bumping their threat level up, and it's just not worth the investment. What do you think, John?
I don't think I've ever taken it. Star Lord. I mean, everybody likes power for the most part, right? But there's not really a whole lot for him to do with it outside of like I don't know if you're doing some like turn 1 plays where I don't know, since he has to hit and then run, you're not really doing that turn 1. I don't know. It's it's not really worth it for Star-Lord. Like kind of like what I said with his downsides where he can fall flat and we left him in S tier because, you know, at a 3 threat, he does amazing things. Once you put him up to a 4 threat, I don't know that that extra power is worth the extra threat that you're paying for it. Ronin, kind of feel the same way with sending him to a 5 threat. Just what's he really going to do with it? His weaknesses are all still there. It's not getting fixed by this one extra power per turn. Isn't that it? Just one power for the power gem,
No, it's 2 extra power, but
two extra
yeah,
power.
yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, I like it a little bit more on Ronin, but for 5 threat and a restricted card, I'd rather just take one of these great splashes and you know maybe take something else. Take one of the other restricted cards. Plus, you can't take this with Space Reality Thanos or anything. So if you have that in your list, just be forewarned, this isn't really an option for you.
yeah. Well, the power gem's actually not restricted. Only space and
Oh,
reality are, but
why did I
it's
think all
still
of them
it's
were?
still not worth it though. I mean, they're all insanely powerful, so
Hmm.
uh, but yeah, we could put that pretty low, I think. Um, then this
I'm
next
kind of
one,
leaning towards D tier for it, just because it might just make your game not fun if you're kind of messing up your roster construction for it. I don't know, maybe I'll say C tier, just to have the fun power gem, the
yeah,
theme there. Yeah,
um,
Galaxy's greatest.
yeah. So
Ooh.
this is the new card coming out with Cosmic Ghost Rider, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, I think it looks pretty sweet. It lets characters who have been injured get a big dumb hero token. So they have to have been dazed and they're flipped over to their other side. So this is going to mostly come up, later in the game. But once you have 1 or 2 characters, or up to 4 actually is what the card lets you play, who are on that side, they play this and they add a die to their attack and defense rolls, which is a really powerful effect. Um, I think this is just going to let Guardians really close the game out. They're already strong late game, and this is just going to really help them play to their strength. I think it's an S tier card. I think you always want this.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, 2 power per Guardian. I mean, I think it's worth it, even if you just do it on one person, especially if maybe you misplay turn one and you overextend your Angela or your Gamora on that long move, and then they just get spiked. Or you forget that Cassandra Nova has her booby trap, and then she advances you into a Mysterio who just blows you up. And oh man, that Spider Foes list. Um, uh, I don't know. It kind of fixes some of the mistakes that I've made as a newer player. And it kind of just makes it a little bit easier early on. So like the earlier that you can play this, the better the card is. Obviously, you don't want to play this early because that means you've been injured and you've been dazed early. Um, but I think it gives you some comeback mechanics almost. Keeps you a little bit more tanky, a little tankier on your backside. So yeah, I would definitely say S tier for now. Maybe I don't end up playing it as much when it actually arrives, but right now I think that's great. Plus, I'm just now noticing in the card art that we have Moondragon and Quasar, Phyla-Vell in that card art. Maybe we're getting
Interesting.
those in the game. We'll cover that later in a affiliation wish list video.
All right, John, tell us about Lovable Misfits, your favorite card.
Lovable Misfits. I mean, it's a wall of text, but basically you roll a die and there's a bunch of effects. I mean, at most, like at best, you have everyone in range to all do some attacks, and you get like 6 free attacks. But I've had it work out where 2 or 3 people get attacks. 1 or 2 people get moves. There is the downside that you could just stun everyone in a range 2 radius around you, but there's a chance that that's what you want. I think Nebula is immune to stun. Is that right? Yeah, so if Nebula gets this and she's up around other people, that's actually a positive for her. So um, maybe she doesn't have like a downside to this card for someone like her, and you can choose who plays this. So it can definitely swing a game, and it could definitely fall flat, and it can definitely hurt you if that stun goes off and you're not necessarily following it with Crew of the Milano. Um, but I still leave it S tier just because it really fits Guardians lists that I like, where you're going super wide, you're just going to see what happens, and then you're just kind of going to react from the opportunities that it presents.
Yeah, and you know, even though it's random, the effects are overwhelmingly positive. Like the only one that actually hurts you is the skull,
Right.
and
So it's a
it's
1 in 8 chance. Yeah.
right, yeah, and then you could stun yourself, but also your opponent. So on average, you're doing a lot of good things with it. I would just say like make sure that being stunned is not going to completely ruin your whole game plan, you know. So um, yeah, so next one, Scuttlebutt on Me. So this is a Beta Ray Bill card. It gives him the option to make an extra attack, and he can pump a bunch of power into it if he wants to for extra dice. Um, so the nice thing about it is that the attack does not cost him an action. The downside is for it to be really significant at all. He needs to put a lot of power into it, and he already has a lot of other good things to spend his power on. Um, like without any power, it's only a 2 dice attack. So, you really need to put power into it. So, I think for that reason, it just doesn't quite make it. I think it's like a C tier card. It's nice if you like really need to finish someone off, but like I said, I think he just has so many other things he
Right.
likes to spend his power on.
Yeah. So like it starts off as a 2 dice attack. So you have to spend minimum, I would say, 2 power just to make it a normal attack. You're probably wanting to spend 3, just the bump from 4 to 5. Statistically, I've been told is huge. um, but I guess the only other thing that I would mention there is just that it will, if it deals damage, you throw short, and I don't believe there's a size restriction. But that can be nice. Um,
That's
but
true.
yeah,
Yeah.
other than that, yeah, I would say this is more of a B tier. Like
Yeah.
it has its uses if you want it. Maybe borderline C tier where you're just trying to, play past the Malekith or something. But yeah, the next one, another new Cosmic Ghost Rider card. It's time travel. Don't ask. I'm gonna pull this one up because I keep forgetting what it does.
Yeah, it's 5 power, so it's very expensive. And it honestly I think it needs a little bit of a rata right now. I think the intention behind it is that on a turn when Cosmic Ghost Rider has his Psychosis token and he's not scoring objectives, he can move medium, drop the Psychosis token, and then if you would score secure, score 1 victory point. And you do this after normal scoring. So I guess theoretically, your opponent has already scored this secure. Right now, the way it's worded, you drop the Psychosis token after you check whether you would secure the point or not, which doesn't really make sense. So I think they'll probably change it. But even with that intended functionality, you're spending 5 power for 1 point. And we talked about how our one concern with him is that he might be a little power hungry. So to me, I don't think this is going to make it. I think this is a C tier.
Unfortunately, I'm gonna put it ahead of Power Gem. Um, unfortunately, I think you're right. I want this to be good, just because we kind of talked about how important it is to like kind of maintain parity with your opponent as you're playing this attrition game. You don't want to get behind too far. Um, yeah, paying 5 power is just a lot to do that. Like you could do that with other gameplays. Like I don't know, you kind of want this to be if you're having to use this card, you don't really want to do it. I don't know. C tier.
All right, and then finishing off with a strong card here.
Ooh,
What do you think, John? S tier? Yeah.
I lean towards S tier just because it has so many uses. We are Groot. He pays and he heals everyone in range 4, I believe. Um, which he's not like he moves very slow, but he doesn't action economy. He's okay with just moving around. And this is not an action, so yeah, he removes 2 damage off of allied characters within 4 and himself for just 3 power. So for just an extra power, you're doing the heal that he already is doing a lot of the time, and then you're healing people within 4. I think this is worth it, even if you're only doing it on like maybe even just one character in him. Um, if you have to send him out to a side point or something just to like go get uh Gamora or whoever in range just to take off 2 damage, just to give them that last activation to just blow somebody up. Um, I'm pretty much happy with playing this card at any situation in the game. I'm taking this most games, so I'm putting it S tier.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it plays to their strength. It helps you win the attrition game. Groot's got that giant health pool. It's an excellent card. So, um, well, awesome. I think this was really fun going through these tiers, John. It really helped me, think about Guardians a little more and, think about where they're at. Um, Here we could, here's our cards. Why don't we look back at our characters and splashes here? Any changes that you want to make? You happy where we're at?
I think Angela's an S tier, but I will leave her where she is. I'm just gonna put her up over Agent Venom.
All right. All
I've just,
right.
I've just spent more time with her than
Yeah.
Agent Venom, so
I mean, I'm a
um
big fan of Angela. We could put her S tier. Yeah.
let's do it.
All right.
Reward everybody for sticking around the video. We'll just throw
Yeah.
her in there at the end. Um
And
yeah.
we don't have a lot of time to go deep into this, but we've talked a lot about how Guardians are super good, and I think there's probably some people watching this video who have been rolled over by Guardians, probably maybe by a really experienced Guardians player. I just felt like he had no chance against them. Um, and Yeah, so we were going to briefly talk about counterplay to Guardians. What are some of the things that you feel like are good against Guardians, John?
Yeah, so pretty much anything with cover. Which some like if it's not part of your team's kit, that can just be kind of board dependent. So like if you're going to a tournament, maybe one table is kind of just laid out differently and you've got more cover options based on size and whatnot. But then you have crises, maybe even that give you cover. Like I hate playing on scoundrels whenever there are 5 points that give you cover. Um, X-Men, I think Storm gives cover in the right circumstances, so they're probably going to spread out more. Yeah, criminals. I can't stand playing against Shadow Organization, and you and Jimmy both love it. I remember the first time that Jimmy hit me with that, like I was just all set up for my deadly duo. For some reason, I had priority, and I was like, I'm just immediately gonna wreck him. And then he just throws down that Shadow Org, and just everything went flat. Um, I know those are some pretty specific examples. Kind of meeting the Guardians on how wide you're going uh, can be really hit or miss, but when it hits, it's pretty bad. They love to focus tall lists, and if you are a somewhat tanky wider list, you can kind of have a good time against them. So they really have to put resources into a lower threat value, which they don't really like to do. They like to punch above their weight.
Yeah, yeah, you're making a lot of excellent points that I definitely agree with. I think going wide is good against them. Damage, it's more efficient if it's like focused into one character. You can just pour damage into Hulk and it's worth it all the way until he goes down, versus if you have all these little three threat characters running around, you leave one of them on one health, that's rough for the attrition player. Now they have to spend a whole nother action to finish that character off. And Guardians do have some tools against wide lists, like the main one being Rocket's Deadly Duo. But if you've got like some stealth thrown in there, some good defensive tech, like Storm's cover, Shield has a lot of defensive tech, a couple stealth characters, and like Eye in the Sky to let you move out of attack range. Like,
Anyone reducing damage.
yeah, you start getting some tricks in there. Go wide. You can really mess up their plan. Crimson Dynamo is a character who you can kind of just throw into your list as a 10th character just to have a good plan against Guardians. He throws out shocks, which, yeah, it's a great condition to reduce the damage coming in. He rerolls attack dice, which helps you stay alive, and it just buys you that time you need to outscore Guardians. Um, you know, this is true against both versions of Guardians, but it's especially true against the Thanos version. You really need a safe extract grab. Um, a lot of teams like you can send up, someone to grab an extract and stand there, and they'll probably be okay if they're tanky. But against Thanos, like you're gonna either have to kind of not grab the extracts, or you really need to grab one and get back to safety. And X-Men check off a lot of these boxes we're talking about. They have cover with their hop. They can grab extracts and get back to safety. And when I say hop, they have that ability where one character can place within one of an ally that's within two of them. You can do that once around. So that gives you that extra movement you need to grab an extract. And then, they have a lot of lower threat characters who are pretty tanky. Characters like Logan and X-23, if they take some damage and then they activate and heal, like that's the Guardians player is not happy about that.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll throw out, just a shout to rooting Thanos. Thanos hates being rooted, however you do it, whether it's, I think Pyro is the most popular option for that. But yeah, Thanos does not like a root. And if you can kill Thanos, easier said than done. But if you can kill him, their game plan kind of falls apart. So
Yeah. So what I just heard was splash Groot everywhere.
Yes, just play Groot in every list and root everybody. So this is a great video, John. It's fun making it. Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
I just want to thank everyone for all the comments on the videos so far, all the feedback, about the videos, and then more importantly, all the feedback on some of these list ideas and some of the character suggestions and maybe some things that we're missing. So yeah, just let us know. We're definitely wanting to get better ourselves, and yeah, hopefully we can take home some tournaments here soon. Jimmy's already got his LVO invite, so it's time for us to get ours.
Gotta step up. Well, yeah, thanks for watching, y'all, and look forward to next time.
All right. Yep. Thanks.